The morning of Ellie Harper's wedding was supposed to be perfect, but her golden retriever, Scout, sat squarely in the middle of the path to the chapel, refusing to move. His soft brown eyes locked onto hers, unwavering, as if he knew something she didn't. She tugged at his leash, her white dress catching on the dewy grass. But Scout only whimpered, his stubbornness unraveling her carefully planned day. What could make a dog so determined to stop his owner on the most important day of her life? Why did Scout, who had never disobeyed her, choose this moment to plant himself like a sentinel? And what truth was he trying to protect her from, hidden in the quiet folds of a small-town American morning? Ellie knelt beside Scout, her hands trembling as she stroked his fur. The air in Willow Creek, Virginia, was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the faint hum of anticipation from the chapel just beyond the trees. Her fiancé, Ryan, was waiting there, his easy smile and steady hands the anchor she'd clung to for 2 years. They'd met at a community barbecue, his charm disarming her guarded heart. He was the son of the town's beloved pastor, a man who seemed to embody everything safe and certain. But Scout's refusal to move felt like a crack in that certainty. "Scout, come on, buddy," Ellie whispered, her voice catching. She glanced at her watch, 8:47 a.m. The ceremony was set for 10 o'clock, and her maid of honor, Mia, would be pacing by now, her phone buzzing with anxious texts. Ellie stood, brushing dirt from her dress, and tugged again. Scout didn't budge. Instead, he let out a low, mournful howl, the kind he reserved for thunderstorms or the rare nights Ellie cried herself to sleep. She thought back to the first time she'd seen Scout, a shivering pup in a shelter cage, his trust earned through months of patience. He'd been her constant through college, her move to Willow Creek, and the slow unraveling of her confidence when she realized she didn't fit into the town's neat expectations. Ellie had always felt like an outsider, too introspective, too quiet, too different. Her parents, back in Ohio, had called her sensitive, but in Willow Creek, that sensitivity made her a puzzle no one cared to solve. Except Ryan. And Mia. Mia, her best friend since their freshman year at UVA, had been the first to make her feel seen. They'd spent late nights talking about dreams, fears, and the weight of living in a world that didn't always understand them. Mia's laugh was wildfire, her courage a beacon. When Ellie came out to her as bisexual in their junior year, Mia hadn't flinched. She just hugged her and said, "You're still you, Elle. And you're enough." That moment had tethered them, a bond stronger than Ellie's fleeting romances or even her engagement to Ryan. But now, with Scout blocking her path, Ellie felt a tug of something deep, a memory, a doubt, a question she hadn't dared to ask herself. Why had Mia been so quiet these past few weeks, her usual warmth replaced by guarded glances? Why had Ryan's assurances about their future felt more like promises to himself than to her? And why, in this moment, did Scout's eyes seem to carry the weight of a truth she wasn't ready to face? Ellie's phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from Mia, "Where are you?" Ryan's asking. She typed a quick reply, Scout's being weird. "On my way." But her fingers hesitated before hitting send. She looked down at Scout, his fur glinting in the morning light, and felt a pang of guilt. He'd always been her protector, her compass. What was he trying to tell her now? She took a step forward, determined to move past him, but Scout sprang up, nudging her backward with his nose. "Scout, stop it," she snapped, frustration bubbling over. But then she saw Ida's faint path veering off into the woods, one she'd never noticed before. It was narrow, overgrown with ferns, and seemed to lead nowhere. Yet Scout's ears perked, his gaze fixed on it, as if urging her to follow. What would happen if she took that path instead of the one to the chapel? Could she trust Scout's instincts over her own carefully laid plans? And what did it mean that her heart, pounding in her chest, seemed to already know the answer? Ellie's breath caught as she glanced between the chapel's distant steeple and the shadowed trail. The weight of her dress, the expectations of the town, and the promise of a life with Ryan pressed against her. But so did the memory of Mia's hand brushing hers at last week's rehearsal dinner, the unspoken electricity that had lingered in the air. She shook her head, trying to dismiss it. She was getting married. She loved Ryan. Didn't she? Scout whined again, softer this time, and took a tentative step toward the hidden path. Ellie's eyes followed, her mind racing. The truth was out there, waiting, but did she have the courage to chase it? Or would she walk past her dog, her doubts, and her heart to step into the life she'd promised to live? Ellie's shoes sank into the soft earth as she hesitated, her gaze darting between Scout's insistent pull and the chapel's faint outline. What was it about that hidden path that made her pulse quicken, not with fear, but with a strange, aching curiosity? Could a single choice in this moment unravel everything she thought she knew about herself? She glanced at her phone again. Another text from Mia. You okay? Need me to come find you? The words felt heavier than they should, laced with a concern that went beyond friendship. Ellie's thumb hovered over the screen, but she didn't reply. Instead, she tucked the phone away and looked at Scout, who was now pacing toward the fern-lined trail, his tail low but determined. Fine, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Let's see what you're so worked up about. She lifted the hem of her dress and followed, her heart thudding against the lace of her bodice. The path was barely a path at all, more a suggestion of movement through the dense Virginia woods. Branches snagged at her veil, and the air grew cooler, scented with moss and secrets. As she walked, memories flooded back moments she'd buried under the weight of her engagement. She thought of the summer after college, when she and Mia had driven cross-country to California, their laughter filling the car as they sang off-key to old pop songs. One night, camped under a sky blazing with stars, Mia had leaned close, her breath warm against Ellie's cheek, and whispered, "What if we just stayed like this forever?" Ellie had laughed it off, but the question had lingered, a seed planted in her heart. Now, with each step, that seed seemed to grow, its roots tangling with doubts she'd ignored. Ryan was kind, dependable, the kind of man Willow Creek adored. But did she love him the way she was supposed to? Or had she said yes to his proposal because it was the path everyone expected her to take? Scout stopped suddenly, his ears twitching. Ellie froze, listening. A faint rustle came from ahead, then a voice soft, familiar, trembling. "I can't keep doing this." It was Mia. Ellie's stomach dropped. She crept forward, peering through the trees. There, in a small clearing, stood Mia, her back to Ellie, her phone pressed to her ear. She was in her maid of honor dress, a deep emerald that hugged her frame, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders. I know, Mia was saying, her voice breaking. But it's her wedding day, and I'm supposed to just stand there and smile. I can't. Sarah. I love her. The words hit Ellie like a physical blow, stealing her breath. Mia loved her. Not as a friend, but more. How had she missed this? Or had she seen it all along and chosen to look away? Scout nudged Ellie's leg, as if urging her to keep listening. She crouched behind a tree, her dress pooling around her, guilt and confusion warring in her chest. Why was Mia confessing this now? To someone else, instead of to her? And why did the revelation make Ellie's heart race with something other than shock? I tried to tell her, Mia continued, her voice quieter now. Last week, at the diner, I almost said it. But she's so set on Ryan, on this perfect life. I don't fit into that. She paused, then let out a bitter laugh. Maybe I'm just selfish. Maybe I should let her go. Ellie's mind reeled. She remembered that night at the diner. How Mia's hand had lingered on hers. How her eyes had seemed to search for something Ellie couldn't name. Had she been blind? Or had she been too afraid to see? She thought of Ryan, his steady presence, his promises of a future together. But that future felt like a script she'd been handed, not a story she'd written herself. What would it mean to confront Mia now? To step into that clearing and demand the truth? Could she face the possibility that her own feelings for Mia went beyond friendship? And what would it cost her her engagement, her place in Willow Creek, her sense of who she was? Scout whined softly, pressing against her. Ellie's eyes stung with tears. She wanted to run to the chapel, to Mia, to anywhere but here. But the path had led her to this moment, and there was no turning back. She took a shaky breath and stood, her decision teetering on the edge of courage and fear. Ellie's heart pounded as she stood frozen, the words "I love her" echoing in her mind. Could she step forward and face Mia, knowing it might shatter everything? Or was it safer to retreat to the chapel, to the life she'd planned, where questions like these could stay buried? She clutched Scout's leash, her knuckles white against the leather. The clearing was only steps away, but it felt like a chasm. Mia was still on the phone, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. "I'll be fine," she said, but the crack in her tone betrayed her. "I just need to get through today." She hung up, her shoulders slumping as she stared at the ground. Ellie's mind raced through the years she'd known Mia. The late-night study sessions, the shared secrets, the way Mia's presence had always felt like home. She'd told herself it was just friendship. But now, with Mia's confession hanging in the air, Ellie couldn't deny the pull she'd felt all along. It wasn't just comfort, it was longing, raw and undeniable. But what did that mean for her future with Ryan? For the vows she was supposed to say in less than an hour? Scout tugged at the leash, pulling her toward the clearing. Ellie resisted, her breath shallow. What would happen if she confronted Mia now? Would it be a beginning or an end? She thought of Ryan, waiting at the altar, his smile warm but never quite reaching the depths of her soul. She thought of Willow Creek, where whispers traveled faster than truth, where being different could mean being alone. "Mia?" Ellie called, her voice barely above a whisper. It was enough. Mia spun around, her eyes wide, her phone slipping from her hand into the grass. For a moment, they just stared, the air thick with everything unsaid. Mia's face was a map of emotions: fear, hope, heartbreak all laid bare. "Elle." Mia's voice trembled. What are you doing here?" Her gaze darted to Ellie's dress, then to Scout, who sat calmly between them, as if he'd orchestrated this moment. "I heard you," Ellie said, her words tumbling out before she could stop them. "On the phone. I heard what you said." Her throat tightened, and she took a step closer, the ferns brushing against her dress. "Is it true? Do you love me?" Mia's breath hitched. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes glistening. "Ellie, I didn't mean for you to hear that. Not like this." She took a step back, her hands twisting together. "You're getting married. I wasn't going to ruin that." "But you're not ruining it," Ellie said, her voice rising. "You're making me question everything. Mia, why didn't you tell me before?" The words felt like a betrayal. But of whom? Herself? Mia? Or Ryan? Mia's laugh was bitter, tinged with pain. "Tell you. And then what? Watch you choose him anyway. You're happy, Elle. You've got this whole life planned out. I'm just," she trailed off, her voice breaking. "I'm just the friend who got too attached." Ellie's chest ached. She wanted to reach out, to close the distance. but her feet felt rooted to the ground. What would it mean to admit that Mia's words had stirred something in her? Something she'd buried under layers of expectation. Could she walk away from Ryan? From the safety of a life that fit so neatly into Willow Creek's mold? Scout nudged her hand, his warmth grounding her. She looked at Mia, at the vulnerability in her eyes, and felt a surge of courage. Mia, I need to know. If I wasn't getting married today, what would you have said? Mia's gaze softened, but her voice was steady. I would have said I've loved you since that night under the stars in California. That I've spent every day since trying to be okay with just being your friend. That I'd give anything for you to look at me the way you look at him. The words landed like stones, heavy and unyielding. Ellie's vision blurred with tears. She thought of the chapel, the guests, the promises waiting for her. But she also thought of Mia's wildfire laugh, her fearless heart, the way she made Ellie feel like she could be herself, fully and without apology. What would it cost to follow her heart now? And could she live with herself if she didn't? Ellie's world tilted as Mia's words sank in, each one a spark igniting questions she'd never dared to ask. Could she turn away from the life she'd built with Ryan to face the truth Mia had laid bare? Or was it too late to rewrite the story she'd told herself for so long? The forest seemed to hold its breath, the only sound Scout's soft panting and the rustle of leaves overhead. Mia stood motionless, her eyes locked on Ellie's, waiting for a response that could change everything. Ellie's dress felt heavier now, the lace and silk a reminder of the vows she was supposed to make. But her heart was pulling her elsewhere, toward the woman who'd just bared her soul. I don't know what to say, Ellie admitted, her voice barely audible. I thought I knew what I wanted. Ryan, the house, the life everyone expects. But now, she trailed off, her eyes dropping to the ground. Now I'm not sure. Mia took a cautious step closer, her voice soft but firm. Elle, you don't have to decide anything right now. This is your day. I shouldn't have, she stopped, swallowing hard. I should have kept my mouth shut. No, Ellie said quickly, her head snapping up. Don't say that. I needed to hear it. I need to know. She took a shaky breath, her mind racing. But I'm scared. Mia? This town. My family. Ryan, they all think they know me. What happens if I choose? She hesitated, the word catching in her throat. If I choose you. Mia's eyes softened, but there was a flicker of fear in them. I don't know. Elle. I wish I could promise it'd be easy. But Willow Creek isn't exactly a haven for people like us. She paused, her voice dropping. And I'd never ask you to give up everything for me. Not unless you're sure. Ellie's chest tightened. She thought of her parents, who'd flown in from Ohio, their pride in her perfect engagement barely masking their discomfort with her bisexuality. She thought of Ryan's father, Pastor John, whose sermons often skirted the edges of judgment. And she thought of the whispers that would follow if she walked away from the altar today. But then she looked at Mia, her best friend, her confidant, the one person who'd never asked her to be anything but herself. The memory of their California trip flashed again, the way Mia's hand had brushed hers as they watched the stars, the unspoken promise of something more. Had Ellie been running from that truth all along? Scout shifted beside her, his warmth a steady reminder of why she was here. He'd led her to this moment, to this clearing, to Mia. What did it mean that her dog, her truest companion, had sensed something she hadn't? Could she trust his instincts and her own enough to take a leap into the unknown? I need time, Ellie said finally, her voice trembling. I can't just walk away from everything. Not like this. She gestured to her dress, the chapel, the life waiting beyond the trees. But I can't pretend I didn't hear you. Either. Mia nodded, her expression a mix of hope and resignation. "I'll be here, Elle. Whatever you decide." She turned to leave, but Ellie grabbed her hand, the touch electric. "Wait," Ellie said, her voice urgent. "Come with me. To the chapel. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I need you there." It was a plea, a lifeline, a refusal to let this moment slip away. Mia hesitated, then squeezed Ellie's hand. "Okay, but only if you're sure." They walked back toward the main path, Scout trotting ahead as if satisfied with his work. The chapel loomed closer now, its steeple cutting through the morning mist. Ellie's heart raced with every step, torn between the safety of the known and the pull of a truth she was only beginning to understand. What would she say to Ryan when she reached the altar? Could she face him with Mia's confession burning in her mind? And how would she find the courage to choose between a life she'd planned and a love she hadn't dared to dream? The chapel's wooden doors loomed ahead, and Ellie's steps faltered as the weight of her choice pressed down. Could she walk down that aisle knowing Mia's love was real? Or would she cling to the safety of Ryan's world? What did it mean that her heart felt split in two, each half pulling her in opposite directions? Scout led the way, his leash slack now, as if his mission was complete. Mia walked beside Ellie, her silence heavy but her presence steady. The faint hum of organ music drifted from the chapel, mingling with the chatter of guests. Ellie's stomach churned. She pictured Ryan at the altar, his suit crisp, his smile expectant. She pictured her parents in the front pew, their faces beaming with approval they'd rarely shown her before. "Mia," Ellie whispered, stopping just outside the chapel. "What if I'm making a mistake? What if I hurt him?" Her voice cracked, and she clutched Mia's hand tighter, searching her eyes for answers. Mia's gaze was soft but unflinching. "You're not responsible for his happiness, Elle. Only your own. What do you want? Not what they want. Not what Ryan wants. What do you want?" The question hit like a wave, washing away the noise of expectation. Ellie closed her eyes, trying to picture her future. A house with Ryan, children, Sunday dinners with his family. It was warm, stable, everything she'd been taught to want. But then she imagined Mia waking up to her laugh, building a life where she didn't have to hide. That vision was messy, riskier, but it felt alive in a way the other didn't. "I don't know," Ellie admitted, her voice barely audible. "I love him. I think I do. But when I heard you in the clearing, it was like I've been lying to myself." She opened her eyes, tears spilling over. "I'm scared of what this means." Mia's thumb brushed over Ellie's knuckles, a small gesture that sent warmth through her. "It's okay to be scared. It's okay to not have all the answers. But you deserve to be with someone who sees you, really sees you." Ellie's breath hitched. She wanted to say more, to ask Mia to stay close, but the chapel doors creaked open. Ryan's sister, Claire, poked her head out, her face a mix of relief and impatience. "Ellie, there you are? Everyone's waiting. You okay?" Ellie forced a smile, her heart racing. "Yeah, just." Scout was being stubborn. She glanced at Mia, who released her hand and stepped back, her expression unreadable. "I'll be inside," Mia said softly, slipping past Claire into the chapel. Ellie watched her go, feeling a pang of loss she couldn't name. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and anticipation. Guests turned to look at her, their smiles warm but expectant. Ryan stood at the altar, his eyes finding hers, and for a moment, everything else faded. He was handsome, kind, the man who'd promised to build a life with her. But as she took her first step down the aisle, Scout tugged at the leash again, his whine cutting through the music. Ellie froze. The guests murmured, and Ryan's smile faltered. She looked down at Scout, then back at Ryan, then to the pew where Mia sat, her eyes fixed on the floor. The weight of the moment crashed over her. What was she walking toward? A life of comfort, or a lie she couldn't sustain? Ellie. Ryan's voice was gentle, but it carried a note of worry. He stepped forward, his hands outstretched. You okay, babe? She wanted to say yes, to keep walking, to make this easy. But Scout's whine grew louder, and Mia's words echoed in her mind. You deserve to be with someone who sees you. Could she ignore that truth now, with the altar so close and the choice so clear? What would it take to stop this wedding, to face Ryan and the town and herself? And could she find the strength to do it, with Scout and Mia by her side? Ellie's feet felt glued to the aisle, the organ's notes fading into a distant hum. Could she say the vows she'd rehearsed, knowing her heart was tangled in Mia's confession? Or would she dare to stop this moment, to choose a path that might break everything apart? Ryan's eyes searched hers, his concern deepening. Ellie, talk to me, he said, his voice low but carrying over the murmurs of the guests. Scout tugged again, his leash pulling taut, and Ellie's gaze flicked to Mia, who was now looking at her, her expression a mix of hope and dread. Ellie started, her voice trembling. She looked at Ryan, at the man who'd been her safe harbor, and felt a wave of guilt. He didn't deserve this. But neither did she deserve to live a half-truth. Ryan, I need a minute, she said finally, her words barely audible. The chapel fell silent. Ryan's face fell, but he nodded, stepping back. Okay. Take your time. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. Ellie turned, her dress swishing as she led Scout out of the chapel, ignoring the whispers that followed. Mia hesitated, then followed, her steps quick and quiet. Outside, the air was cooler, the mist thicker. Ellie sank onto a bench, her hands shaking as she buried them in Scout's fur. Mia stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, her eyes searching Ellie's face. What's going on, Elle? She asked softly. What do you need? I don't know, Ellie said, her voice breaking. I thought I could do this. I thought I could marry him and be happy. But then you said what you said, and now I can't stop thinking about it. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. Why didn't you tell me sooner, Mia? Why now? Mia knelt in front of her, her eyes glistening. Because I was scared, too. Scared of losing you. Scared of ruining what we had. But watching you walk toward him today, I couldn't keep it in anymore. She reached for Ellie's hand, then stopped, her fingers hovering. I'm sorry I made this harder. Ellie shook her head. You didn't. Or maybe you did. But I needed it. I needed to know. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone else wants. My parents, this town, even Ryan. But I don't know if I can keep doing that. Mia's voice was barely a whisper. What do you want, Elle? Really? Ellie closed her eyes, letting the question settle. She thought of the years she'd spent hiding parts of herself, the nights she'd lain awake wondering why she felt so out of place. She thought of Mia's laugh, her strength, the way she'd always made Ellie feel whole. And she thought of Scout, who'd led her to this moment, as if he'd known the truth before she did. I want to be honest, Ellie said finally, her voice steadier. With myself. With you. With Ryan. She opened her eyes, meeting Mia's gaze. I think I've loved you for a long time, but I was too afraid to admit it. Mia's breath caught, and for a moment, they just sat there, the weight of the confession settling between them. Then Mia smiled, a small, trembling thing. You don't have to decide everything today, Elle. But I'm here. I've always been here. Ellie nodded, her heart pounding. She knew what she had to do, but the thought of facing Ryan, of unraveling the life she'd planned, terrified her. Could she walk back into that chapel and tell the truth? And what would it mean for her place in Willow Creek? For the people who thought they knew her? Scout nudged her hand, his eyes steady and sure. Ellie stood, smoothing her dress, and looked at Mia. "Come with me," she said. "I need to talk to Ryan. And I need you there." Mia nodded, her hand finally finding Ellie's. Together, they walked back toward the chapel, Scout leading the way. The truth was waiting, and for the first time, Ellie felt ready to face it. The chapel doors creaked as Ellie pushed them open, her heart a drumbeat in her chest. Could she tell Ryan the truth and still hold on to the kindness they'd shared? Or would her honesty shatter the fragile world they'd built together? Ryan was waiting just inside, his face pale but composed. The guests had quieted, their eyes following Ellie as she stepped forward, Scout at her side and Mia a step behind. She felt their stares, heavy with curiosity and judgment, but she focused on Ryan, on the man who deserved her truth. "Ellie," Ryan said, his voice gentle but strained. "What's going on? Are you okay?" He glanced at Mia, then back at Ellie, his brow furrowing. "I need to talk to you," Ellie said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Alone?" She looked at Mia, who nodded and stepped back, taking Scout's leash. The guests murmured again, but Ellie ignored them, leading Ryan to a small side room off the chapel, where hymnals and candles lined the shelves. The door closed behind them, muffling the outside world. Ryan reached for her hands, but she stepped back, her heart aching at the hurt in his eyes. "Ryan, I'm so sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I thought I could do this. I thought I could be the person you needed, the person this town expects. But I can't." His face fell, but he didn't interrupt. Ellie took a breath, the words spilling out. "I love you, Ryan. You've been nothing but good to me. But I've been hiding something from you, from myself. I'm in love with Mia. I think I have been for a long time." The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's jaw tightened, and he looked away, his hands clenching at his sides. "Mia," he said finally, his voice low. I saw the way she looked at you. But I thought," he trailed off, shaking his head. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know," Ellie said, tears spilling over. "Or maybe I did, but I was too scared to face it. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to lose you." She reached for his hand, but he pulled back, his expression a mix of pain and resignation. "You're not losing me," he said, his voice breaking. "But I can't. I can't be with someone who doesn't love me the way I love them." He met her eyes, his gaze raw. "I want you to be happy, Ellie, even if it's not with me." Ellie's throat tightened, and she nodded, unable to speak. She wanted to hug him, to take away the pain she'd caused, but she knew it wouldn't help. Instead, she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Ryan. You deserve better." He gave a small, sad smile. "So do you?" He turned toward the door, then paused. "Tell the guests whatever you want. I'll handle my family." With that, he walked out, leaving Ellie alone with the weight of her choice. She sank onto a chair, her hands trembling. Scout pushed through the door, followed by Mia, who knelt beside her. "You okay?" Mia asked, her voice soft. "I don't know," Ellie said, her voice raw. "I heard him, Mia, and I don't know what happens now." She looked at Mia, at the woman who'd sparked this upheaval, and felt a flicker of hope amid the pain. "But I know I want to find out. With you." Mia's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled Ellie into a hug, her arms warm and sure. Scout pressed against them, his presence a quiet anchor. What would the future hold now that Ellie had chosen her truth? And could she face the consequences? Willow Creek's judgment, her family's disappointment, her own doubts with Mia by her side. Ellie stood outside the chapel, the weight of her decision settling like dust after a storm. Could she build a life with Mia in a town that might never accept them? Or would the truth she'd fought for become a beacon for something greater than herself? Mia's hand was warm in hers, a quiet promise as they faced the path ahead. Scout trotted beside them, his tail wagging now, as if he'd known all along where this moment would lead. The guests had dispersed, their whispers trailing behind them, but Ellie felt lighter, unburdened by the secrets she'd carried. "I need to tell my parents," Ellie said, her voice steady but tinged with fear. "They're not going to understand." She pictured her mother's tight smile, her father's awkward silence when she'd come out years ago. They'd hoped Ryan would fix her, make her fit into their vision of normal. Mia squeezed her hand. "You don't have to do it alone. I'll be there, if you want." Her voice was calm, but her eyes held the same fear. Ellie felt the fear of rejection, of a world that might not make room for their love. Ellie nodded, drawing strength from Mia's presence. They walked toward the reception hall, where her parents were waiting, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. "Ellie, what happened?" her mother asked, her voice sharp. "Ryan said the wedding's off. What's going on?" Ellie took a deep breath, her hand still in Mia's. "I couldn't marry him," she said, her voice clear. "I love someone else. I love Mia." The words felt like a release, a truth finally spoken aloud. Her mother's face paled, and her father looked away, but Ellie kept going. "I know this isn't what you wanted for me, but it's who I am, and I'm done hiding it." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Her father cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "We just want you to be happy, Ellie. But it's going to be hard. This town, these people, they won't make it easy." "I know," Ellie said, her voice steady. "But I'm not alone." She glanced at Mia, who gave her a small, encouraging smile. Scout pressed against her leg, his warmth a reminder of the journey that had brought her here. The days that followed were a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. Willow Creek buzzed with gossip, and Ellie felt the sting of judgment in every averted gaze. But there were moments of grace. Two friends who reached out, neighbors who offered quiet support. Ryan, true to his word, stood by her, deflecting questions and defending her choice. His kindness broke her heart all over again, but it also gave her hope that healing was possible. Ellie and Mia moved forward together, their love a quiet rebellion against the town's expectations. They found solace in small things, walks with Scout, late-night talks, dreams of a future where they could be themselves without fear. And Scout, ever faithful, seemed to know his work was done, his role as Ellie's guide complete. One evening, as they sat on a hill overlooking Willow Creek, Mia turned to Ellie, her eyes bright. "You did it, Elle. You chose yourself. And you chose us." She leaned in, her lips brushing Ellie's, a promise of the life they'd build together. Ellie smiled, her heart full. The path hadn't been easy, and the road ahead would have its challenges. But with Mia by her side and Scout at her feet, she knew she'd found her truth. What had begun with a dog blocking her path had led her to a love she'd never dared to dream in, a life that was finally her own.